The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Windsor Castle as Muick, a young dorgie with sandy-colored fur and alert brown eyes, trotted alongside his handler through the pristine corridors. The castle buzzed with an energy unlike any other day. Staff members hurried past carrying flower arrangements, polished silver, and ceremonial items that gleamed under the chandeliers. Muick's sensitive nose picked up unfamiliar scents, fresh paint, new fabrics, and the excitement radiating from every person he encountered. Queen Elizabeth II had received Muick as a gift during the challenging days of the pandemic, and the little dog had quickly become her constant companion. Named after Loch Muick in Scotland, where the Queen had spent many peaceful moments, the dorgie possessed an intuitive understanding of royal protocol that amazed even the most seasoned palace staff. He never barked during important meetings, always walked at the perfect pace beside the Queen, and seemed to sense when she needed comfort during difficult times. As preparations intensified for the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, marking her 70 years on the throne, Muick found himself at the center of unprecedented activity. The Queen had specifically requested that he remain close during the festivities, understanding that his presence brought her joy and calm during what would be an emotionally overwhelming period. Palace officials initially worried about including a dog in such formal proceedings, but the Queen's wishes were absolute. The head of palace security, a stern man named Commander Phillips, had initially expressed concerns about Muick's presence during public events. However, after witnessing the dog's remarkable behavior during smaller gatherings, he became one of Muick's strongest advocates. The dorgie seemed to understand the gravity of royal occasions, adjusting his demeanor accordingly, and never causing disruptions that might embarrass the crown. Muick's daily routine changed dramatically as the Jubilee approached. Instead of leisurely walks through the private gardens, he found himself accompanying the Queen to rehearsals, fittings, and planning meetings. The dog observed as designers presented elaborate costumes, as military officials coordinated parade routes, and as catering staff planned menus for thousands of guests. His presence seemed to ease the Queen's stress during these intense preparation sessions, and staff members began to appreciate how the loyal companion helped their sovereign maintain her legendary composure. The Queen's dresser, a woman who had served the royal family for decades, noticed how Muick would position himself strategically during costume fittings. He never got in the way, but his presence clearly comforted the Queen as she tried on the various outfits planned for different Jubilee events. The dog seemed to sense when she felt tired or overwhelmed, offering silent companionship that spoke volumes about their special bond. Training sessions became part of Muick's preparation for the public celebrations. Palace staff worked with him to ensure he would remain calm amid the crowds, noise, and pageantry that would characterize the Jubilee festivities. The dog proved remarkably adaptable, maintaining his dignified demeanor even when exposed to loud music, cheering crowds, and the complex choreography of royal ceremonies. One particularly challenging rehearsal took place in the castle's main courtyard, where military bands practiced the musical arrangements planned for the official celebrations. The thunderous drums and brass instruments created a cacophony that would have sent most dogs running for shelter. Muick, however, sat calmly beside the Queen's chair, his ears alert but his body relaxed, demonstrating the natural composure that had made him such an ideal royal companion. The Queen's private secretary marveled at how Muick seemed to understand the historical significance of the approaching celebrations. During meetings about the Jubilee timeline, the dog would lie quietly at the Queen's feet, occasionally lifting his head when discussions became particularly animated. His intuitive behavior reinforced the palace staff's growing conviction that he would be an asset rather than a liability during the public festivities. As the final week of preparation arrived, Muick's role in the celebrations became more clearly defined. He would accompany the Queen during specific outdoor events, travel with her in the ceremonial carriage during portions of the parade, and remain by her side during the balcony appearance that would mark the climax of the Jubilee weekend. The responsibility weighed heavily on the palace staff, but Muick himself seemed completely unfazed by the enormous expectations placed upon him. The bond between the queen and her loyal companion deepened during these intense preparation days. Staff members observed tender moments when a monarch would absently stroke Muick's fur while reviewing documents, or when the dog would gently place his head on her lap during particularly stressful meetings. These intimate gestures reminded everyone that beneath all the ceremony and pageantry, the Jubilee represented a deeply personal milestone for a woman who had dedicated her entire adult life to serving her country. Palace veterinarians conducted thorough health checks to ensure Muick would be physically prepared for the demanding schedule ahead. They confirmed that the young Dorgi possessed the stamina and emotional stability necessary for such high-profile public appearances. Special arrangements were made for his comfort during long ceremonial events, including designated rest areas and carefully planned breaks that would allow him to maintain his energy throughout the celebrations. The international media began taking notice of Muick's planned participation in the Jubilee events. Royal correspondents from around the world requested information about the Queen's canine companion, recognizing that his presence would add a heartwarming human element to the formal ceremonies. Palace press officers carefully managed these inquiries, emphasizing Muick's role as a source of comfort and companionship for the Queen during this momentous occasion in British history. The first official day of the Platinum Jubilee dawned bright and clear, with London streets already filling with excited spectators despite the early hour. Inside Windsor Castle, Muick sensed the electric atmosphere as palace staff made final preparations for the day's events. The Queen emerged from her private chambers wearing an elegant powder blue ensemble, her demeanor calm, but her eyes sparkling with anticipation for the historic celebrations ahead. Muick had been groomed to perfection by the palace's specialist dog care team, his coat brushed until it gleamed, and his ceremonial collar polished to mirror-like brightness. The collar, specially crafted for the Jubilee by the same artisans who created royal jewelry, featured subtle engravings of the crown and the royal cipher, marking him as an official participant in the celebrations rather than merely a pet accompanying his owner. As the royal entourage prepared to depart for London, Muick demonstrated the training he had received over the previous weeks. He walked calmly beside the Queen as photographers captured their journey to the waiting vehicles, his posture alert and dignified despite the chaos of activity surrounding them. Palace staff exchanged satisfied glances, recognizing that their careful preparation had produced exactly the result they had hoped for. The journey from Windsor to London provided Muick with his first real test of the day. The roads were lined with thousands of well-wishers waving flags and cheering enthusiastically as the royal convoy passed. Through the car windows, Muick observed the massive crowds with curious interest rather than anxiety, his calm demeanor providing comfort to the Queen as she waved graciously to her subjects. The dog seemed to understand that he was witnessing something extraordinary, a celebration of devotion and loyalty that reflected the deep connection between the monarch and her people. Upon arriving at Buckingham Palace, Muick encountered a level of activity that dwarfed even the intensive preparations at Windsor. The palace courtyard bustled with military personnel, media representatives, and distinguished guests from around the world. Horse guards in gleaming ceremonial armor stood at attention while their mounts stamped restlessly, sensing the excitement in the air. Muick navigated this overwhelming environment with remarkable composure, staying close to the Queen while remaining alert to his surroundings. The first major public appearance took place on the palace balcony, where the Queen traditionally greeted the crowds gathered along the mall. As palace doors opened to reveal the famous balcony, a roar erupted from the thousands of people below. Muick experienced a moment of startled surprise at the volume of the cheering, but quickly recovered his composure when he felt the Queen's reassuring touch on his head. Together, they stepped onto the balcony where Muick became visible to the massive crowd below. The sight of the small dog beside the Queen prompted an even louder cheer from the assembled spectators. Muick remained perfectly still as photographers captured the historic moment, his presence adding a touch of warmth and humanity to the formal grandeur of the occasion. Children in the crowd pointed excitedly at the royal dog, while their parents captured photos and videos that would become treasured family memories of this extraordinary day. During the ceremonial parade that followed, Muick rode in the ornate state carriage alongside the Queen, experiencing the full pageantry of British royal tradition. The carriage, drawn by magnificent gray horses, proceeded slowly through streets lined with cheering spectators. Military bands played stirring marches while color guards presented arms in perfect synchronization. Through the carriage windows, Muick observed a kaleidoscope of Union Jack flags, colorful banners, and excited faces that stretched as far as the eye could see. The Queen pointed out various landmarks to Muick during the parade route, her voice gentle and reassuring amid the overwhelming sensory experience. The dog seemed fascinated by the rhythmic clip-clop of the horse's hooves and the musical accompaniment provided by the military bands. His calm behavior throughout the lengthy procession impressed even the most skeptical palace officials, who had worried about potential disruptions during such an important public event. At Westminster Abbey, where a special Thanksgiving service marked the religious aspect of the Jubilee celebrations, Muick waited patiently in a designated area while the Queen participated in the formal ceremony. Palace staff marveled at his ability to remain quiet and composed despite the organ music, choir performances, and movement of hundreds of distinguished guests. The dog seemed to understand the solemnity of the occasion, maintaining a dignified posture that reflected the training he had received. The afternoon garden party at Buckingham Palace provided Muick with his first opportunity to interact with members of the public who had been specially invited to meet the Queen. Children were particularly delighted to encounter the royal dog, and Muick responded to their gentle attention with friendly but restrained enthusiasm. He allowed careful petting while remaining focused on his primary responsibility of staying close to the Queen, demonstrating the perfect balance between accessibility and duty that characterized the best royal companions. Distinguished guests from around the world expressed fascination with Muick's presence at such formal events. Foreign dignitaries, many of whom had their own beloved pets at home, appreciated the Queen's decision to include her loyal companion in the celebrations. The dog became an unexpected diplomatic asset, providing a natural conversation starter that helped ease the formal atmosphere of international relations. As evening approached, Muick participated in the spectacular concert held in the palace gardens. The event featured performances by world-renowned musicians and entertainers, with elaborate lighting effects and fireworks that illuminated the London skyline. Despite the loud music and explosive pyrotechnics, Muick remained calm and attentive, his behavior reflecting the thorough preparation he had received for such challenging environments. The Queen frequently glanced down at Muick throughout the concert, clearly drawing comfort from his steady presence during what had been an emotionally intense day. Palace staff noted how the dog seemed to sense when she needed reassurance, positioning himself closer to her chair during particularly overwhelming moments of the celebration. His intuitive response to her needs demonstrated the deep bond that had developed between them during their time together. Media coverage of the day's events consistently highlighted Muick's role in the celebrations, with international news outlets featuring photographs and video footage of the royal dog throughout their Jubilee coverage. Social media platforms filled with positive comments about the Queen's decision to include her beloved companion, with many people expressing admiration for the obvious affection between the monarch and her four-legged friend. The day had exceeded all expectations, establishing Muick as an integral part of the Jubilee celebrations and setting the stage for even more memorable moments in the days ahead. The second day of the Platinum Jubilee brought new challenges and excitement as Muick prepared to participate in the grand military parade that would showcase Britain's armed forces. The elaborate ceremony, known as Trooping the Colour, represented one of the most prestigious events in the royal calendar, featuring hundreds of soldiers in full ceremonial dress, magnificent horses, and the precision pageantry for which the British military was renowned worldwide. Muick awakened early in his comfortable quarters within Buckingham Palace, immediately sensing the heightened activity throughout the building. Palace staff had arranged special accommodations for the royal dog, including a luxurious bed, premium food, and access to a private garden area where he could exercise and relieve himself away from the public eye. The careful attention to his needs demonstrated the palace's commitment to ensuring his comfort throughout the demanding schedule of Jubilee events. The Queen appeared particularly animated as she prepared for the day's festivities, her excitement evident despite her legendary composure. She spoke softly to Muick as her dressers helped her into the magnificent military-inspired ensemble chosen for the occasion, complete with decorations representing her role as head of the armed forces. Muick watched attentively as the intricate process unfolded, seeming to understand the importance of the ceremony they would attend together. As they prepared to leave for Horse Guards Parade, where the main ceremony would take place, Muick received final grooming touches from the palace staff. His ceremonial collar was adjusted to ensure perfect positioning, and his coat received a final brushing to maintain the immaculate appearance expected at such formal events. The dog stood patiently throughout these preparations, demonstrating the remarkable tolerance that had made him such an ideal royal companion. The journey through London to Horse Guards Parade provided spectacular views of the city decorated in honor of the Jubilee celebrations. Buildings along the route displayed magnificent banners and decorations, while thousands of spectators lined the streets, hoping to catch glimpses of the royal procession. Muick observed the colorful scene through the carriage windows, his alert expression suggesting fascination with the elaborate displays of loyalty and celebration surrounding them. Upon arriving at Horse Guards Parade, Muick encountered the most impressive military display he had yet experienced. Hundreds of soldiers in scarlet uniforms and tall bearskin hats stood in perfect formation, their polished boots and gleaming weapons reflecting the morning sunlight. The sight was both magnificent and overwhelming, but Muick maintained his composure as he accompanied the Queen to the reviewing stand from which they would observe the ceremony. The parade began with the thunderous sound of military drums and the stirring notes of brass instruments as the guards began their elaborate marching display. Muick remained perfectly still beside the Queen's chair, his ears alert to the complex rhythms and melodies that accompanied the precisely choreographed movements of the soldiers below. The dog seemed mesmerized by the colorful spectacle, occasionally tilting his head to better observe particular formations or movements that caught his attention. As the ceremony progressed, Muick witnessed demonstrations of military precision that had been perfected over centuries of royal tradition. The guards performed complex maneuvers with their weapons, executed flawless marching patterns, and maintained absolute synchronization despite the enormous scale of their formations. The Queen occasionally leaned down to murmur observations to Muick, pointing out particularly impressive displays or sharing her knowledge of the historical significance behind various ceremonial elements. The appearance of the household cavalry provided the most dramatic moment of the parade as dozens of magnificent horses thundered past the reviewing stand in perfect formation. Muick watched with obvious fascination as the mounted soldiers performed intricate maneuvers, their polished armor gleaming and colorful plumes dancing in the breeze. The rhythmic thunder of hoofbeats and the jingling of ceremonial tack created a symphony of sounds that seemed to captivate the royal dog completely. During the most solemn moments of the ceremony, when the Queen's personal standard was raised and the national anthem played, Muick demonstrated remarkable sensitivity to the gravity of the occasion. He remained absolutely motionless, his posture reflecting the dignity and respect appropriate to such significant moments. Palace staff observed his behavior with admiration, recognizing that his natural instincts perfectly complemented the formal requirements of royal protocol. The climax of the ceremony featured a spectacular flypast by the Royal Air Force, with vintage aircraft and modern jets streaking overhead in carefully planned formations. The thunderous roar of engines caused many spectators to look skyward in awe, but Muick remained focused on the Queen, seemingly more interested in her reactions than in the dramatic aerial display above them. His devotion to his royal companion was evident to all who observed their interaction, during these magnificent moments. Following the formal ceremony, Muick accompanied the Queen during the traditional balcony appearance that allowed the royal family to acknowledge the thousands of spectators gathered outside Buckingham Palace. The crowd's enthusiastic response to seeing the royal dog on the balcony was immediate and overwhelming, with cheers and applause that seemed to continue endlessly. Photographers captured countless images of Muick standing proudly beside the Queen, creating iconic photographs that would become lasting symbols of the Jubilee celebrations. The afternoon brought a special reception for military veterans who had served throughout the Queen's long reign. Muick proved to be an unexpected diplomatic asset during this event, as former service members were delighted to meet the royal dog and share stories of their own military service animals. The dog's presence helped create a warm, informal atmosphere that allowed the Queen to connect more personally with the veterans, many of whom had traveled great distances to participate in the Jubilee celebrations. One particularly moving moment occurred when an elderly veteran, who had served in World War II, knelt down to pet Muick while recounting memories of the military dogs who had served alongside him during the war. The Queen listened intently to his stories, clearly moved by his recollections of canine courage and loyalty during those difficult years. Muick seemed to sense the emotional weight of the conversation, remaining perfectly still and attentive throughout the veteran's narrative. As the day concluded, palace staff reflected on how successfully Muick had integrated into the formal military ceremonies while maintaining his role as the Queen's beloved companion. His presence had added a humanizing element to the grand pageantry, reminding spectators that beneath all the ceremony and tradition, the celebration honored a woman who found joy and comfort in the simple companionship of a loyal dog. The combination of magnificent spectacle and genuine emotion had created exactly the kind of memorable experience that would be treasured by all who witnessed it. The international media coverage of the day's events consistently featured Muick prominently, with commentators noting how his presence enhanced rather than detracted from the dignity of the ceremonies. His calm behavior and obvious bond with the Queen provided compelling visual storytelling that resonated with audiences around the world, many of whom were pet owners themselves and could appreciate the special relationship between the monarch and her four-legged friend. The day had further established Muick as an integral part of the Jubilee narrative, setting expectations for his continued participation in the remaining celebration events. The third day of the Platinum Jubilee brought a completely different atmosphere as the celebrations moved beyond formal military ceremonies to embrace the cultural richness and diversity of modern Britain. Muick found himself preparing for events that would showcase music, art, and community spirit, requiring him to adapt once again to new environments and experiences that tested his remarkable ability to remain calm and composed under any circumstances. The day began with a special visit to Westminster Abbey, where the Queen and Muick attended a Thanksgiving service that brought together religious leaders from across the Commonwealth. The ancient cathedral, with its soaring Gothic architecture and centuries of history, provided a dramatically different setting from the outdoor military parades of previous days. Muick walked quietly beside the Queen as they entered through the Great West Door, his claws clicking softly on the worn stone floors that had witnessed countless royal ceremonies throughout British history. Inside the Abbey, Muick experienced the magnificent acoustics of the sacred space as choirs from around the world filled the air with harmonious voices raised in celebration and gratitude. The dog remained perfectly still throughout the lengthy service, positioned discreetly beside the Queen's ornate chair in the front row. His behavior during the religious ceremony impressed church officials, who had initially harbored concerns about including an animal in such a solemn and sacred setting. The afternoon brought an entirely different challenge as Muick accompanied the Queen to a spectacular street festival in central London that celebrated the multicultural heritage of modern Britain. The event featured performers representing dozens of different cultural traditions, with colorful costumes, energetic music, and elaborate floats that transformed the city streets into a vibrant carnival atmosphere. The sensory overload of sights, sounds, and smells presented the most challenging environment Muick had yet encountered during the Jubilee celebrations. Caribbean steel drum bands filled the air with infectious rhythms while dancers in elaborate feathered costumes performed traditional moves that had been passed down through generations. Muick watched with obvious fascination as the performers moved past the royal viewing area, his head turning to follow the most colorful and energetic displays. The Queen occasionally pointed out particular groups or performances, sharing her knowledge of the various cultural traditions represented in the diverse celebration. Food vendors from around the world had set up stalls throughout the festival area, creating an amazing array of international cuisines that reflected London's position as one of the world's most multicultural cities. The aromatic spices and cooking smells created a complex olfactory environment that challenged Muick's sensitive nose, but the well-trained dog remained focused on his duties rather than being distracted by the tempting food aromas surrounding them. Children from local schools had prepared special presentations for the Queen, including artwork, poetry, and musical performances that celebrated her long reign and the changes Britain had experienced during her time on the throne. Muick proved to be particularly popular with the young performers, who were thrilled to discover that the Queen had brought her dog to their special event. The informal interaction between the children and the royal dog created some of the most heartwarming moments of the entire Jubilee celebration. One especially memorable encounter occurred when a group of young artists presented the Queen with a painted portrait that featured both her and Muick prominently. The children had spent weeks creating the artwork, carefully researching the Queen's appearance and working from photographs to capture Muick's distinctive features and coloring. The Queen expressed genuine delight with their creation, while Muick seemed to recognize his own image in the painting, tilting his head as he studied the children's artistic interpretation of his appearance. The cultural festival also featured traditional British Morris dancers, whose energetic performances with bells, ribbons, and wooden sticks created a lively spectacle that represented some of England's oldest folk traditions. Muick appeared particularly intrigued by the rhythmic jingling of the dancers' bells and the complex patterns of their movements, maintaining his focused attention throughout their entire performance. The contrast between the ancient traditions and the modern multicultural celebrations perfectly captured the evolution of British society during the Queen's long reign. As evening approached, the festival culminated in a magnificent concert that brought together performers from across the Commonwealth nations. The stage was set up in front of Buckingham Palace, with elaborate lighting and sound systems that transformed the palace grounds into a world-class entertainment venue. Muick experienced his first major outdoor concert, complete with amplified music, laser light shows, and pyrotechnic displays that lit up the London sky. International recording artists performed songs that celebrated themes of unity, tradition, and hope for the future, while massive video screens displayed images from throughout the Queen's reign. Muick observed the spectacular visual displays with calm interest, having been gradually accustomed to such sensory experiences during his preparation for the Jubilee events. His steady behavior throughout the concert impressed security personnel who had worried about potential problems during such a high-energy musical celebration. The highlight of the evening came when performers from all the day's cultural events joined together on stage for a massive finale that featured hundreds of musicians, dancers, and singers representing the full diversity of the modern Commonwealth. The stage overflowed with colorful costumes and instruments as the combined groups performed a specially composed piece that incorporated musical elements from dozens of different cultural traditions. During the concert's most emotional moments, when performers sang about service, dedication, and loyalty, cameras captured intimate shots of the Queen listening intently while Muick rested quietly at her feet. The juxtaposition of the grand spectacle with the simple companionship between the monarch and her dog provided powerful imagery that resonated with audiences both at the event and watching around the world through television and internet broadcasts. The Queen clearly enjoyed the musical performances, occasionally tapping her foot to particularly catchy rhythms and applauding enthusiastically after each act. Muick seemed to feed off her positive energy, remaining alert and engaged throughout the lengthy concert despite the demanding schedule he had maintained throughout the 3 days of celebrations. His stamina and consistent good behavior had exceeded even the most optimistic expectations of palace staff. As the concert concluded with a spectacular fireworks display that illuminated Buckingham Palace and the surrounding area, Muick experienced the most intense sensory bombardment of the entire Jubilee celebration. The thunderous explosions and brilliant flashes of light created a dramatic finale to the cultural festivities, but the well-prepared royal dog maintained his composure even during this overwhelming climax to the evening's entertainment. The day's events had demonstrated Muick's remarkable adaptability and his ability to enhance rather than complicate the Queen's participation in diverse public events. His presence had provided a consistent thread of warmth and humanity throughout celebrations that showcased both traditional British ceremonies and the multicultural reality of modern Commonwealth society. Palace staff recognized that the royal dog had become far more than just the Queen's pet. He had evolved into a beloved symbol of the personal side of the monarchy that people around the world found both accessible and endearing. The final day of the Platinum Jubilee dawned with a bittersweet atmosphere as the extraordinary 4-day celebration prepared to reach its emotional climax. Muick awakened in his palace quarters to find the familiar sounds of preparation echoing through the corridors. But there was a different quality to the activity today, a sense of culmination and reflection that seemed to permeate every aspect of the final festivities. The Queen herself appeared more contemplative as she prepared for the day's events, occasionally pausing to stroke Muick's fur while gazing out at the palace gardens where so many memories had been created over her remarkable 70-year reign. The morning began with an intimate ceremony in the palace's private chapel, where the Queen attended a quiet service of thanksgiving accompanied only by close family members and Muick. This personal moment of reflection provided a peaceful contrast to the public spectacles of previous days, allowing the monarch to contemplate the profound significance of the milestone she had achieved. Muick remained perfectly still throughout the service, seeming to sense the emotional weight of the occasion as prayers of gratitude were offered for the Queen's long years of faithful service to her people. As preparation began for the grand finale pageant that would conclude the Jubilee celebrations, Muick underwent his final grooming session with the palace staff who had cared for him throughout the week. The experienced handlers had grown genuinely fond of the royal dog, impressed by his consistent good behavior and natural dignity during what had been an unprecedented series of public appearances. They took extra care with his appearance, ensuring that his ceremonial collar was perfectly positioned and his coat gleamed with the lustrous shine that had become his trademark during the celebrations. The pageant itself represented the most ambitious and elaborate event of the entire Jubilee weekend, featuring a spectacular procession that would wind through the streets of London before culminating at Buckingham Palace. Hundreds of performers, military units, and community groups had spent months preparing for this moment, creating a moving tapestry of British history and culture that would celebrate both tradition and the promise of the future. Muick would accompany the Queen in the ornate gold state coach, experiencing the full grandeur of royal pageantry at its most magnificent. As they took their places in the historic coach, which had been used for coronations and state occasions for more than 2 centuries, Muick seemed to understand that this would be his most important public appearance. The coach itself was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, decorated with gilded carvings and lined with sumptuous fabrics that reflected the wealth and artistry of British royal tradition. Through its crystal windows, Muick could observe the massive crowds that had gathered along the processional route, their faces filled with excitement and affection for their beloved Queen. The procession began slowly, allowing spectators ample opportunity to see and photograph the Queen and her canine companion as they passed. Muick handled the swaying motion of the coach with remarkable composure, maintaining his position beside the Queen while occasionally glancing out at the cheering crowds that lined every street along their route. Children held up hand-painted signs featuring drawings of the royal dog, while adults captured photographs and videos that would become treasured family keepsakes of this historic moment. Military bands provided stirring musical accompaniment throughout the procession, their carefully rehearsed performances creating a soundtrack that perfectly complemented the visual spectacle of the pageant. Muick appeared fascinated by the variety of musical styles represented, from traditional military marches to contemporary compositions that had been specially commissioned for the Jubilee celebrations. His alert expression and attentive posture suggested that he was fully engaged with the magnificent ceremony unfolding around him. The most emotional moment of the procession came as they passed through areas of London that held particular significance for the Queen's long reign. At each landmark, crowds erupted in spontaneous singing of God Save the Queen and other patriotic songs, their voices combining to create powerful choruses that seemed to rise from every corner of the city. Muick remained calm and dignified throughout these overwhelming demonstrations of affection, his steady presence providing comfort to the Queen during what were clearly deeply moving experiences for her. As the procession neared Buckingham Palace, the crowds became even more dense and enthusiastic, with people from around the world who had traveled to London specifically to witness this historic celebration. The sight of the Queen and Muick together in the ornate coach created countless photographic opportunities that captured the unique combination of formal grandeur and personal warmth that had characterized the entire Jubilee celebration. International media representatives positioned throughout the route ensured that these images would be broadcast around the globe, sharing this moment with millions of viewers who could not attend in person. The pageant's finale took place in front of Buckingham Palace, where an enormous crowd had gathered to witness the concluding ceremonies. As the gold state coach arrived at the palace gates, the roar of approval from the assembled spectators was deafening, creating a wall of sound that demonstrated the genuine affection and gratitude that the British people felt for their Queen. Muick stepped down from the coach alongside the Queen, his composed demeanor providing a striking contrast to the overwhelming excitement of the moment. The final balcony appearance represented the emotional climax of the entire Jubilee celebration, as the Queen and Muick emerged together to acknowledge the massive crowd that stretched from the palace gates far down the mall. The sight of the small dog standing proudly beside his royal companion prompted perhaps the loudest cheer of the entire weekend, with spectators expressing their delight at seeing the genuine bond between the monarch and her beloved pet. Photographers captured countless images of this iconic moment, creating photographs that would become lasting symbols of the Platinum Jubilee celebration. As the celebrations concluded with a spectacular fireworks display that illuminated the London sky, Muick experienced his final public moment of the Jubilee weekend. The thunderous explosions and brilliant colors created a fitting finale to what had been an unprecedented 4 days of pageantry and celebration. Throughout the dramatic display, Muick remained close to the Queen, his steady presence providing one last demonstration of the loyalty and companionship that had made him such an integral part of these historic events. In the quiet moments after the crowds had dispersed and the palace returned to its normal routine, the Queen spent time reflecting on the extraordinary celebration with Muick at her side. Palace staff observed these private moments with deep respect, recognizing that the bond between the monarch and her dog represented something far more profound than mere pet ownership. Muick had become a symbol of the personal warmth and humanity that existed beneath the formal requirements of royal duty, demonstrating that even the most exalted positions could be enriched by simple companionship and unconditional love. The legacy of Muick's participation in the Platinum Jubilee would extend far beyond the celebration itself, inspiring countless stories and memories that would be shared for generations to come. His remarkable behavior throughout the demanding schedule of public events had proven that animals could play meaningful roles in even the most formal state occasions, provided they were properly prepared and genuinely loved by their human companions. The royal dog had not only survived the challenges of public scrutiny, but had thrived in ways that enhanced the celebration for everyone involved, creating a lasting testament to the power of the bond between humans and their beloved animal companions.